In the tapestry of life, where every thread holds a story, America in black and white emerges as a haven for the voices echoing through the heart of our communities. In this podcast, we wade through the rivers of our collective experiences, celebrating the vibrant hues of change brought forth by the whispers of hope and the roars of action. It's more than just a conversation. It's a journey into the heart of our society, illuminated by the light of those daring to dream and do. Join us, and let your voice be the melody that guides us toward a dawn where every color finds its place in the masterpiece of our shared destiny. Together, let's paint a future brimming with the positives that dwell in our minds and the actions that shape our world.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of America in Black and White. Let me ask you something. How many of you have ever walked into a room, briefcase in hand, credentials on the wall, smile locked and loaded, and not one person in that room had any idea that you were quietly fighting a war on the inside? How many of us have been told either out loud or in the unspoken language of survival that strength means silence, that being together means never falling apart? How many of us were raised to believe that what happens in this house stays in this house, and that this house included your mind, your pain, and your peace? Tonight, we're cracking that house wide open with love, with courage, and with purpose. See, there's a particular burden that Black people carry in professional spaces. It is not just imposter syndrome, though that is real. It is not just the double consciousness that Dr. Du Bois wrote about over a century ago, though that is still with us too. It is something even more layered. It is the performance of wholeness when you are working toward it. It is showing up as the expert, the leader, the dean, the director, the advisor, the mentor, the anchor for every student who walks through your door, while quietly, privately, courageously walking your own health, your own healing path. And in the Black community, we have been conditioned for generations to call that strength. And in some ways, it is, but tonight, we're going to call it something else. We're going to call it what it is truly: unsustainable unless we talk about it. The silence around mental health in our community did not happen by accident. It was born in a history where vulnerability could cost you everything, where showing weakness was a liability, where the church said, pray it through, and the neighborhood said, handle your business, and the family said, we do not need to tell strangers our problems. And I understand every single one of those survival strategies. I honor them. But I'm also here to say, breaking that silence is not betrayal. Breaking that silence is revolution. And tonight, we have a revolutionary in the building. He is a scholar whose life's work is wrapped around the question of who belongs and who is made to feel like they don't. He holds a PhD in educational leadership, policy, and justice. He serves as the director of advising and professional development at a major Southeastern university, where every day he pours himself into students, shapes advisors, and builds the kind of institutional culture that actually sees people. He is a proud member of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, the first, and when the workday is done and the professional mask comes off, he opens the microphone and does something that is frankly one of the most courageous acts of public life today. He tells the truth about what it means to be Black and diagnosed. His podcast, Black and Diagnosed, is not a show about statistics. It is a sanctuary. It is proof that your diagnosis is not your ceiling or calling, it is a door. America in black and white family, I need you to lean in tonight because this conversation is going to challenge you, heal you, and set something free inside of you. Please welcome to the mic a leader, a healer, a truth teller, and a brother, Dr. Gerron Scott. Hello, Dr. Scott.
Hey, good evening, everyone. How's it going?
All right, how are you?
I'm doing great. Just happy to be here. How are you?
I'm excellent. Thanks for being here. And before we get into the show, there's two questions I got for you. Did I say your name right?
It's Gerron.
It's Gerron. Okay, I'm sorry about that. And the second thing is there anything you'd like to say to our audience before we get into the show?
Yeah, I'm just here. I'm a very open book. You can follow me online at Black and Diagnosed. I'm very open. Listen to the podcast. We're in season 2. It's great. We're getting a lot of listens, a lot of views, but we could always use more. Some subscribers. Listen, rate the show, and just happy to be here.
Great. And so, what I like to start off with, sir, is I like to give our audience the opportunity to learn a little bit about our guests as we get further into the show. And this part I like to call your roots, identity, and your life story. So, can you take us all the way back to the beginning? Where did you grow up, and what did home feel like? What are the sounds, the smells, the people that shaped your earliest sense of who you were?
I'm originally from Providence, Rhode Island, smallest state, but it's a very diverse place. Providence is very diverse. I'm Cape Verdean, so my family's Black and Cape Verdean. So I have family traced my roots to slavery as well, but also from a small African island off the west coast of Senegal. But so I grew up with my uncle. He primarily raised me. I lived with my parents to about age 11, 12. Then through middle school and high school, I lived with my uncle. So the smell is a good question. He cooked, and I remember him cooking. He passed now, but he made this chicken pot pie. It smelled so amazing. And now I'm just thinking back how great that smelled, and it was honestly one of the greatest smells ever. I loved it, and I'm just thinking back. He would cook it, and one of the last things we've done together before he passed was actually make that chicken pot pie. And I remember that day we sat down, we played some chess. That was mine and his game. We would just play chess all day, and we played chess. We made chicken pot pie, and that was it. That was probably one of my favorite memories of growing up. Is before he passed was playing chess and making that chicken pot pie.
So, as you think about that then, and when you think about back then and compared to now, shall I say, and thinking about those times and making that pot pie, how good it smelled, and the things that the two of you did together, what did that leave on you? What kind of impression did that leave on you to make you the individual that you are today?
It left a great impression. It's just always put your best self forward. Always be there for family. Always be there. Be kind. Be confident. One of the things my uncle taught me was to always be confident in myself. All right. I remember going to college, going to high school. I said I wanted to be a leader. I wanted to be leader. And when I went to college, he was like, "Don't forget to be a leader." And he remembered that from when I was 13 years old, when I said I wanted to be a leader. Leaving the college at 17, he said, "Don't forget to be a leader and don't forget to be confident." So he just really just thinking back, and him just remembering that little small little conversation just really meant a lot to me.
So, as a young black man coming of age in America, how early did you become aware of the world's perception of you, and how did that awareness shape your sense of identity and purpose?
So being in the Northeast, stop and frisk was very popular. So middle school is the first time I was stop and frisked. So a very young age where it's like you're a black man. I didn't live in the best neighborhood. So it was extremely early where I had my first run-in with the police. And that really it shaped my perception. There's a natural mistrust of police officers as a result. You know, I get pulled over and it's just like, is it because I'm black or was it because of moving violation? Right.
Right. No, you know something? That is always a thing that happens with a lot of us. And I know that, that can be a bit strange, but did that cause any kind of stress and anxiety on you?
Absolutely. To this day, I see a police officer. I'm just like, is he gonna stop me? I'm just walking. I'm just walking down the street. Is he looking at me? They look at me and they just see a black man. They don't see my credentials. They don't see my education level. They just see a black man. And it's honestly and truly scary, right? That's all they see is a black man.
Right. So, what values were non-negotiable in your household where you were raised in? Which of those values still anchor you today, and which did you have to re-examine as you grew?
I said what was set was kindness. My grandmother, she taught me to always be kind to people. Like no doubt, like just always be kind. I remember one time in a grocery store, there was an incident and she was just like, that was completely unnecessary. That would have been solved if people were kind to each other. And ever since then, that's just been my MO, just to be just to be kind. And it just always stuck with me. And one of the things I had to re-examine was actually like my empathy towards people. Because the world would try to beat you down, right? And it makes you it takes away your empathy sometimes. And I had to really sit there and re-examine why I wasn't as empathetic as I was before, right? Growing up in the Northeast, we can be a little blunt, and moving to the South for college, I wasn't as empathetic as I could have been. So I had to really re-examine that in my 20s, like, hey, why aren't I as empathetic as I could be?
So, was there a defining moment in your childhood or adolescence, a conversation, an event, a failure, or a triumph that you look back at on as the moment something shifted in you and you began to understand your purpose?
Yeah, I would say I'm an amputee. I lost the toes on my right foot. I'll say that was the defining moment of my childhood. It really changed the course of who I became. I became a little more withdrawn. I didn't hang out in the neighborhood as much. I was more focused, like internally. I withdrew to like books and everything else like that. So that was definitely like the most defining moment of my life. That completely changed the course of my life.
So, did it make you more of an introvert to where you just decided you just wanted to be alone, or did you eventually change that and come out the shell to start communicating and being around people more?
Um, it, it it made me an introvert for a bit. I would say I'm definitely an extrovert, but it made me more of a self-conscious person to where I'm always constantly thinking, is something wrong with me? Is someone going to see my foot? What's going to happen? Things like that.
How would you describe the version of yourself that existed before the degrees, before the title, before the platform? And what do you owe that younger version of yourself?
I would describe him as this extremely confident go-getter, right? He's seen something and he went for it, right? Whether it was a career move, a a date, a anything that I wanted, I was just going to get it. Like it was in a positive way, as long as it didn't hurt myself or hurt anybody else. Like
Mhm.
I would work towards it, right? And that's what I would describe myself as a go getter, and what I would owe myself is what was the second part of the question? I'm sorry.
Yeah, and what do you owe that younger version of yourself?
I owe him the world because that really shaped who I am, right? Those lessons, those failures. I remember I had a job that I hated, but it shaped who I am. It really did shape who I am and what I knew, what I did not want in a career, in a role, right? At that time, I just accepted any job because I was happy. I was just like, well, I need a job. This is a job offer. So I'm just going to accept the job versus being patient, waiting for the right job to come along. I'm just going to accept any job. And I had to learn that I can be patient. I can pick the right place, the right job. So I owe my younger self a lot because my younger self learned some hard lessons.
So, Black identity is not monolithic. It is layered, complex, regional, familial, and deeply personal. How do you hold and express your own Blackness in a world that often demands you shrink it or perform it on someone else's terms?
Oh, that is a great question. I just think for me, it's discovering what Blackness means every day. I think for me, my Black identity is evolving every day. Um, I'm a strong believer in intersectionality, so my Blackness is tied to everything else, right? My disabilities, my socioeconomic status, my Blackness is so intertwined to everything else, but it's evolving every day. I'm a Black man, I'm a father, I'm a husband, and all those factor in to who I am as a Black man, my Black identity. I'm a man, I'm a son, I'm a dad, I'm all these things. And I think for me, what it means to be Black, it means to be it means to be powerful, right? I think there's so much power in being Black, right? Looked at we're looked down upon, but there's so much power. We are the trendsetters of the world. Blackness, Black culture dominates the world.
Yes.
And people don't like to say that, but it's the truth. You go overseas, they're playing Black music in clubs and bars, right? They're playing. I was in Japan at a bar, they were playing Black music in Japan, right? I was in Portugal, they were playing Black music. So Blackness is powerful. We are the dominant culture, yet people put us down. But collectively, we're just powerful. And that's how my Black identity, I know the power that I hold, and that's why I push for everything. I'm writing, it's about to be published now, but I wrote a book chapter on intersectionality, on identity, how to use our identity to connect with others. And through it, that's when I recognized how powerful identity is.
Wow. Let's switch to talk a little bit about your academic and professional journey. Walk us through your academic journey from your undergraduate years all the way to earning your PhD in educational leadership, policy, and justice. What was that road like?
It was a fun road. It was fun. I'm one of those people where I think school can be challenging, but also fun. I was a biology major in undergrad and I minored in mass communications. I was pre-med, but I didn't go to med school. My GPA wasn't bad. Med school just wasn't for me, and that's okay. I did graduate with a pretty good GPA. It's just med school wasn't for me. But I enjoyed biology. That's why I never switched my major. I graduated with a 3.3. It just wasn't for me. Um, but I enjoyed the biology classes. My favorite class was comparative vertebrate anatomy, and that's one of the hardest classes you will ever take.
Mhm.
Right? You have to memorize the evolution of of uh, from an amphibian all the way to a mammal, from a shark to a mammal, from a invertebrate to a vertebrate, and it's the veins, the muscles, the bones, how they all develop. And I had a blast in that class, and it's one of the hardest classes you ever take. And in mass comm, I took all film classes. I really enjoyed it. I thought about becoming a documentary filmmaker, and then I
Uh-huh.
realized they don't make a lot of money. Not that I make a lot of money now, but they they don't make a lot of money either. Um, but that wasn't for me. I My master's is in counseling, college student affairs. So my master's was to work with college students. I did not like my counseling program. They 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 didn't have cultural competency.
Okay.
I think that's when I was first hit with my first major depressive episode. And instead of coming to me and asking me, was I okay? They said, well, you're not showing up to class. So we're gonna discipline you by taking points away from your grade. And that was fully because I was a black male, right?
Right.
Had I been a white person, they would have been like, what's wrong?
Right.
And
Okay. Yes,
and I,
sir.
I
You're
know that.
absolutely right.
And I have nothing positive to say about my counseling program. I have not a positive thing. Well, I did have a couple nice teachers, I will say that. But the vast majority of my professors were not nice people. I do not have anything positive to say. But my PhD program, I had a blast in. The professors, every single one of them were amazing people. They cared. That's when I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. They said, we got you. We're going to make sure you get this, you get through this. We're gonna work with you. My PhD advisor, Dr. Wilson, was absolutely amazing. He said he wanted to explore bipolar disorder as a dissertation topic. Let's do it, right? And he was my PhD classes, they were great. I did get a 1B, and that was when I was going through my initial diagnosis phase where the medicine was working through my body. And I hated it because it was in um qualitative research, and qualitative is my jam. That was my dissertation, was qualitative, and that was my only B. The rest were A's. But I have Virginia Commonwealth University. I have nothing but positive things to say about my PhD program. Like, it was absolutely amazing.
Let's go back for a second. You mentioned biology before you switched your major. Can you tell us why biology and then why the sudden switch after you
So
loved it so much?
my undergrad degree is in biology. My master's is in counseling.
Okay, okay.
So, but for me, I became a biology major, one, because I love animals, right? I love reptiles. I own a snake now. I love reptiles. I have a dog. I have fish. So, like, I just have this deep love for nature. So, like, biology, it came natural for me. Like, biology, the sciences were my easiest classes in high school versus versus English, history. I had like the STEM classes, they were easy for me. They were easier for me. So I was like, I'm just gonna be a STEM major.
Wow. Okay. So, when did higher education stop being just a path you were walking and became a field you felt called to serve? What was the turning point where it became your personal and purposeful work to do?
So I was highly involved in college. I was fraternity life, homecoming director, student government association, a bunch of other clubs and organizations. So one of the fraternity advisor was like, "Hey, look into this master's program. I think you'd be a good fit for it." So I did, and I was just like, "Oh, this is great." I enjoyed it. Then it wasn't really until I got to my third career, my third job, I was like, I think this is for me. And I was academic advisor, and I really always wanted to be an advisor. So when I got into that role, I was really helping students, guiding them through their 4 years at a university. That's when I really hit my stride, and I was like, "This is really for me."
Wow. Wow. Um, Doctoral programs can be isolating, especially for Black scholars. What were the moments that nearly broke you, and what or who held you together?
I had this one experience with this one student, and whew, oh man, this we were doing a group project, and we got into it. And what I remember they said something to me. I'll never forget this. And she wanted to see something a certain way, and I said, I can't do it that way. We have the same exact information. It's just looks different. And she said to me, if you want to publish, you have to do it this way. At this point, I already had two research publications. So I said to her, I'm already published. And she got up and stormed away. So I sent the professor an email. I said, her behavior has been abhorrent. I've never used that word before. That
Mhm.
was the first time I've ever used that word in a sentence. And I was like, I cannot work with this woman. Like, she, and I just cannot work with this woman. And
Mhm.
this is like I took and I that's when I told my professor, I was just like, I'm going through this diagnosis process. So I am stressed to the max. I am going through this diagnosis process, adjusting to this medication, and pushing through this graduate program. So I am struggling internally, but I'm pushing through. Like every night I'm going home, like I'm crying because of the medication. I just want the medication to work. Then I have this colleague of mine who just doesn't get it because she thinks she knows everything.
Oh wow. Mhm.
And her thing was she wanted to work with minority students. I don't believe everybody should work with black people. That's one thing I strongly believe. Not everybody's equipped to work with black people. Even if you think you want to, you really need to reevaluate yourself and really be culturally competent.
Can I just ask you because, I agree with that assessment because I think when there are, let me just put it this way, when there are other cultures that think that they can work, they can teach, they can just work with black students, they find it to be difficult. And the reason why it's difficult is because they're not up to snuff, but also they're not able and willing to adjust for what it takes. In situations like that, what made you come to that conclusion that everyone should not be working with black
Um,
students?
it really it really stemmed from my master's program. I had a student in a group counseling class say to me, "I'm intimidated by you."
What? For real?
And I'm in my I'm not the biggest guy, right?
Right.
I I gained a little weight now, some happiness weight from my marriage, but I've never been the biggest guy.
Right.
Um and she said that because again, I was a black male. Even like the professor had to come apologize. And all the
Mhm.
students were like, "What? Why are you intimidated by him?" But this student wanted to work with black children,
Oh.
right? So it's
Mm.
just like you're intimidated by someone who's in the same class as you, right? We're getting the same level of education, and you're intimidated by me. So it just goes. So I sense the same thing, that intimidation, because they hate confident black people.
Right.
So when they see students who are confident in their abilities, it scares them, right? When they see students who know who they are, students who say to professors and teachers, like, I know who I am. Like, you're here to teach me, and they have the savior complex. And when students aren't like, thank you for coming in and saving me, they have a problem with that.
Look, let me. I have a question here in the chat for you. If you could answer this, this would be wonderful. Let me put it on the screen for you. Um, this young lady asks, "says Shouldn't it be people working together regardless of color?"
Absolutely. But again, it goes back to that cultural competency, like I keep saying, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right. There's no problem with anybody working together as long as they're culturally competent. And to be culturally competent means understanding,
Yes.
right? It means to not be intimidated by a black person
Right.
who's sitting across from you getting the same level of education as you. It means recognizing cultural differences, recognizing that people do things differently from you. And again, it stems back to that cultural competency.
So tell us about a mentor, a professor, or a colleague who saw something in you before you fully saw it in yourself. How did that belief change your trajectory?
Um, I would say my fifth grade, my I'll start very, very young. I started school a little late from my accident when I lost my toes, but
Mhm.
my fifth grade science teacher, again, I've really always been a science kid. I did a project and she was just like, this is really, really good. I'm gonna put you in an advanced science class with and so I was taking middle school science in fifth grade as a
Oh,
result.
wow.
And she was like, because I handed in the project, I was really, really good. And that really showed how intelligent, how smart I could be. Right. And that started me on a path. Then going forward, I made the honor roll for the first time in sixth grade. And I was just like, oh my God, I made the honor roll. Like that's crazy. So
Right.
then, I ended up getting straight A's one of the quarters. And just going forward, that just shows if I worked hard enough, I could get good grades. And that from there really just stemmed my love for school, my love for academics. Then going forward, I had a professor when I was doing my dissertation. She said, this is great work. You're doing great things. Looking to grounded theory for your dissertation, and no one's doing, there is no research at the time of my publication of my dissertation. There was zero research on black men with bipolar disorder.
Wow.
So
Oh, that is something.
So she was like looking to grounded theory. So I ended up creating a theory of disability acceptance, which extended beyond Black men with bipolar disorder and extended to the whole disability community.
Mhm.
So of that set down a path of just amazingness. So throughout my life, I've had these professors and these teachers just pour into me.
Mhm. So, as we think about that, and you did your dissertation, in the subject matter that you did it in, when you mentioned about the bipolar disorder and so forth, can you tell us what steered you towards that direction? Because what I think is so great about that is that, one, it deals with human behavior. Two, it deals with how the mind works, and you think about chemical imbalances, people daily lives, you think about environment, you think about just what is happening at the moment for people, especially black men. What led you to this part of your dissertation, and why was that so important to you?
Um, I looked at it because I was struggling. I was struggling to make sense of my diagnosis.
Mm-hmm.
Then I wanted to see from a scientific standpoint what literature was out there to help me make sense of my diagnosis. And there
Mm-hmm.
was none. And I was just like, how can I make sense of this from an educational standpoint? Right? What can I do to help them in it from on a college campus to help move the needle? Because oftentimes with Black men, it's, we're going to do a Black male initiative, right? Black
Mm-hmm.
men graduate at a low rate, students with disabilities graduate at a low rate. So when you put that together, it's an extremely low graduation rate and low retention rate. So what I wanted to do, I wanted to move the needle on both, right? It's a small population. It's a very specific population, but if I could help move the needle, that's one group of people where they can say, we have this intersectional identities that we can move the needle on.
Your PhD is in educational leadership, policy, and justice, three distinct but intertwined disciplines. How do those three tenses, those three lenses, show up in the practical everyday work you do at the university?
I set policy every day. I love making policy. That's my favorite part of the job is setting policy. And that's because it has widespread effects, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's impacting the day-to-day lives of students, right? It's impacting how students interact with the system. The
Mm-hmm.
leadership comes, I lead a lot of committees, and justice, we can't use the word social justice anymore. It's one of those banned words, but it's one of those things where it's just that equity piece where we're creating equity for these students where we're just saying to them, we're saying to the professors, to the staff, we want people to have an experience where when they graduate, they'll say, this school gave me an experience like no other. I'm going to tell other people to come to this school. For example, with my PhD program, I had someone on my podcast who went to the same institution, but they went for undergrad. And we both were just like, you know, if we had kids, we're gonna say, "Hey, you should go to this school because we both had such a great experience." Like my son wants to play football, and VCU doesn't have a football team, unfortunately. So I wouldn't really recommend that. But if he's just like, I just want to go to school for something specific, I'm like, yeah, go to VCU. You know, but it's it's just one of those things where we want to create an equitable experience so when they graduate they're looking back and say, you know what, my experience there was so great that I'm going to recommend that school to someone else.
I have another question for you here in the chat. Let me put it on the screen. This it says, question: can a policy be broken to meet the needs of the people in the university?
Ooh, that is a great question. I don't think policy can be broken, but I think it can be interpreted well, right? I think as long as it's interpreted within the confines of making sense, I think so. And I also think policy can change to fit the needs. For example, when I was at my first institution working, there was a Title IX case, which is deals with like sexual assault, sexual cases, and stuff like that, where a student was appealing her grades, and they said, she has to write a letter detailing what happened. And I was like, I had to email my boss, tell my boss, like, hey, they want her to write a letter detailing what happened and basically re traumatize her. She's already scared to go to class because she has to see the perpetrator. So my boss was like, that's unacceptable. So one of the things we did within the policy was talk to the Title IX office, and they said, we'll write the letter on
Okay.
behalf of the student. So that's one of the things where the policy can be interpreted to favor the student or favor the person.
Oh, wow. What would you tell young black men or women today who is considering pursuing a doctorate but feels like the academy was not built for them because the data suggests they're not entirely wrong?
They're not wrong. They're 100% not wrong. But again, I think it goes back. This is the theme of this is culturally competency, right? It
Right.
goes back to finding a culturally competent program. I was fortunate enough to go to a highly ranked program, but it was at an urban university, a very urban
Ah,
university, right? So that was key for me. It was a university that was in the heart of a city, and it was people who understood their assignment, right? They were preparing people to work in urban environments. But it goes to finding culturally competent programs that understand that they're going to have people of color, they're going to have people of color on staff, right? Or they're going to have, if there's not a lot of people of color on staff, you're going to have that conversation with them. You're going to say, this is my research interest. Will you support this? And typically, when you do a PhD program, especially in humanities, you're talking to the people ahead of time. You're saying, hey, this is my area of interest. Will you support that? Or you're talking to like the coordinator or the program, what's the word? Program coordinator or the program what's the program recruiter, the recruiter of the program, and you're saying like, hey, this is my research interest, and they'll tell you this professor might be a good fit for you, and you go have a conversation with them. Then when you apply, you're applying directly to the professor more than likely.
okay.
So that way you be matched with someone who will support your research interest. So you won't be matched with someone who will be like, you can't do this.
Right.
So that's just really one way to find a good professor.
So let's move over and talk a little bit about your work as director of advising and professional development. For people who are unfamiliar with what director of advising and professional development actually does, can you break it down for us? And what does your average day look like? And what does it feel like?
I'll give today as an example. Today I met with our director of industry partnerships, and what we did, we planned out the semester of the professional development piece. We talked about like resume, career fair, internships. We talked about graduate school, how to prepare for graduate school, what a gap year looks like, all those different things like that. And the advising piece is really setting the policy, working with the undergraduate advisors, making sure that they have what they need to succeed, talking about the different classes that students need. Um, we're and training the advisors. That's a big piece of what I do is provide the training for the advisors.
So what is your advising philosophy? If you had to write it on a wall in your office for every advisor you lead to see and to live by, what would it say?
Oh, that's good. I love talking advising philosophy. Um, I would say the first part of my philosophy is to be student first, right? And what I mean by that is to remember that we're there for the students, and we're there for the students to matriculate through college. The second part of my philosophy is to develop myself to be the best advisor that I can be. And that means going to professional development, highlighting myself, doing professional development. One of the things I think I mentioned earlier was I'm writing a book chapter. So taking part in professional development of advisors. So that's part of my philosophy as director is helping provide training for other advisors. My third part is being flexible within my advising style. There's appreciative advising, flipped advising, career coaching advising, all these different types of advising. So really finding the right approach for the students and being flexible in that. So that's like the TL short version of my advising philosophy.
Okay. And so leading a team of advisors is different from being an advisor. Uh, how did you grow into the leadership dimension of this role, and what were the early humbling lessons?
It really just started. I always knew I wanted to be a director of advising. So what I did was I led committees, right? I said, you're looking for a leader of this committee, let me lead it, right? So academic advising is very at the basic level, you don't lead teams. I got a graduate assistant, a couple of those. I wrote some grants. I did presentations. I did all these things to build my resume up to become a director. And a humbling experience. There's so many humbling experiences when you start out. It's learning. I remember one of the first papers I read in grad school was Don't Drink the Water. And basically that is learn where you're at, right? Don't go in there to try to change things the first week. And so one of the things that I learned was don't go in there and expect people to be your biggest cheerleader yet, because they're still failing you out, right? And it was humbling to see that, people like I've been here before, and those people who interviewed for my position that I was now over.
Oh, wow.
So it was really just massaging some egos and saying, I have your back, and people were saying, I wanted your position. So it was kind of humbling to see that.
So are they still trying for your position?
No, I think we smoothed that out.
Institutions are complex, political, and often resistant to change. How do you navigate the tension between advocating fiercely for students and working within systems that were not always designed with them in mind?
Oh, um, you gotta find allies. I give you an example. We've recently instituted a policy where everyone has to use the same documentation system, and you know there were faculty members who did not want to use that system just because they're like, I've been here 30 years and this system's only 6 years old, and I like the way I was doing it before. But again, it goes back to that equity piece where students weren't getting the same treatment. They couldn't review the notes that the other advisors were making.
Mhm.
So what we did is we found faculty allies. Then we went to their parents, which were the deans. We said, we were like, hey, deans, this is why it's important. So we ended up getting some buy-in from the deans, and the deans were like, hey, we need you to do this. So that is how we did that.
I have another question for you here in the chat. I'll put it on the screen for you. It says, how do universities treat students of different colors? I don't know what that means.
I think if I can take a stab at that, um, it depends on the university. Um, More urban universities or students with more diverse populations treat students differently than universities with less students of color. I would say at the institution I was at previously, they really focused on that students of color population just because they needed that retention rate. That factored a lot into the retention rate and graduation rate. The institution I'm at now is majority white by a lot. I would say maybe 80% white versus the other one was maybe 55, maybe even less white. Um, so it really just depends on an institution. With the Dear Colleague letter that I think the ended up getting reversed, but they got rid of a lot of diversity offices. So it really went to departments to really diversify and put on those programs. So from my viewpoint, it's been difficult, to be honest with you, for to find programs, especially on campuses with a extreme majority of white students and a small population of students of color.
So let me just ask you this because I don't want to put words in your mouth, but that sounds really interesting to me. It sounds like what you're saying is that at PWIs have more of an issue with that situation because there's less students of colors. There's not really more of a diverse population. So for them, that's not really an issue. But when you go to more urbanized universities that's really, really diverse, they deal with those situations accordingly. Did I hear that properly?
Not necessarily, because there's still, even at PWIs with a large majority of white students, the students of color still need to feel comfortable, right?
Right. I
Even
understand that.
more so, because oftentimes they might be one or two students of color in their classrooms, so it can be really isolated. But and today, on today's college campus, they can't really do a lot of diversity programs, so it's really up to the student organizations to do the programs, to the fraternities, the sororities, for the Black student unions to do the programs. It really can't come from an institutional level.
So in that situation, this question here that's just been put in the chat, I'll put it on the screen. He asked, how far have universities come in the world today, in your opinion?
Today, my answer 2 years ago, my answer would be completely different. But today, I think they've been set back about 20 years.
Ooh. You know, I'm not going to even say anything up because I've said that that's because of what's happening today. That's
Yeah,
why that's the case because it's not just the the Department of Education. That's pretty much a lot of pertinent things in this country have been set back 20 years, and
exactly.
it's going to take 30 to 40 years to actually correct that if they can course correct.
Yeah, it's gonna take a long time to course correct, but it's been set back maybe more than 20 years. It's been set back a lot because they can't do a lot of programs that they used to do. There was a real focus on getting minority retention rate, getting that retention rate, getting those scholarships. A lot of institutions can't even give up minority scholarships anymore. There was
Right.
UNC Wilmington who were giving out scholarships for minority students, and they were like, you can't do that. So they actually took that scholarship away. The family took that scholarship away and said, well, we're not just going to do it at the university anymore. So it's an ongoing thing.
So, what does student success mean to you beyond GPA, graduation rates, and retention metrics? What are you actually measuring when you ask yourself if your team is doing the work well?
I think holistic development, I think, do students feel ready to graduate? I think that's important, because students can graduate in 4 years, 5 years, 6 years, but do they feel ready to tackle the problems of the world? Right? Are they feeling prepared, right, to be global citizens? And what I mean by global citizens, are they prepared to be a good person? Are they prepared to be someone who can say, I'm proud that they graduated from this institution.
Mhm. So as you think about that and your work as director of advisement, how do you guys, with your department, with your program, with the part of the school that you work with, tell us, how do you guys fit this in with the work that you're doing out in the community as you getting these new students that are coming in that need to either learn about diversity, learn what university life is like, just all of those good things to make them understand what they're getting themselves into when they come to your school?
So there's a lot of first year programming and programming beyond the first year that really helps the students get integrated in the community. So where I'm at, it's more of a rural campus. So the city is really and revolves around the campus. But there's a lot of like off-campus activities where they really want the students to get involved.
Right.
So it's basically like, here's the city, here's the keys to the city for the students.
Wow. So now this right here is this is a really good question for you. I'm gonna put it on the screen for you. He asked, "How do you feel when you see graduates become working members of society?"
It actually feels pretty good when they become positive working members of society. Um, and I say positive because there are some people who get out there and do negative work where they go out there and say, you know what, I'm going to tear other people down, right? And that's the reality of it. But when I see people going out there be successful and in their careers and saying, you know what, I'm just gonna go out there and they don't necessarily have to be out there helping people, but they can be out there contributing to their field. And that to me feels amazing.
And this is I'm going to ask you this question. This is, I think, is a question that's also relevant to not just the work you're doing, but when we talk about your students. Is there a student story, one you can share without compromising privacy, that crystallizes for you exactly what this work matters and why you show up every single day?
Oh my God, there's so many. I remember we were down to 3 advisors for 2,000 students. Yeah, that was crazy. 2,000 students for 3 of us. And for some reason, students, they find who they really like and they attach to that. I had a student with a 1.7 and I said, hey, you have to get your act together. And he sat down, he said, how do I get my act together? And we sat down and we talked about it. We spent a couple of sessions and said, you know, this is what you need to do. And he took it. I was very blunt. He said, I just need you to be honest with me. What do I need to do to succeed? He said, my goal is med school. He ended up graduating with a 3.4.
Oh, wow.
He had to retake a couple of classes, but he ended up graduating with a 3.4. And to me, that just shows the level of commitment that students have and a belief. Once you show that belief in students, they really need someone in their corner just to say, you know what, thank you for believing in me. And to me, he did all the work. I just said, this is how you got to get it done, right? This is the tutoring where you need to go to. This is how you talk to the professors. This is where you need to sit in class. Here's some study habits. This is the stuff you need to do. But that I think back on that and that feels special. And this, I was a biology advisor, so a lot of my students went on to med school. So like that really helped. I won some awards and some students wrote letters of recommendations for my awards. But you know, it's a lot of success stories, but that one really sticks out to me in the work that I've done.
I have two questions here for you before I move on. I'll read them both and let you respond to both of these. This is the first one. He wants to know, are you a university professor? The second question is, do you feel staffing has become harder in universities today?
I have taught a few classes. I am not a professor. I thought about going that route, but tenure track is getting harder to get, and I would only feel comfortable being a professor if I got tenure track, and that is getting harder to get. And the second question is staffing getting harder at universities. I would say yes and no. Um, I would say it's getting harder because just the job market is getting tighter. And no, because depending on the position, universities might be hiring like advising. Universities, it's advising has a high turnover rate because people get burned out quick. Because you are meeting with 300, some majors like biology, I was meeting with 300, 400 students a semester,
Oh, wow.
right?
That's a lot for one person.
Yeah, it was a lot. I was during registration season, I had 10 meetings a day.
Mm.
So it it was a lot. But
So let's transition over to student belonging and equity in higher education. You have built your scholarly and professional life around the concept of student belonging. Define that for us in your own language, and what does it actually mean for a student to truly belong on a college campus?
I think for me, student belonging is, I think going back to earlier, student belonging is by the time they graduate, they can look back on on their career and say, you know what, I am satisfied with I am satisfied with the university. I feel like the time I spent here was worth it, right? College is expensive, right? I want to know, regardless of price, that they feel it was worth it.
So, what are the most persistent and pernicious equity gaps you see in advising and student support services today, and what is the higher education community doing wrong in addressing them?
Ooh, I would say the biggest gaps. Hmm, the biggest gaps would be, I think, the assumption that some students don't need help, right? There's this murky middle between that 2.7 to 3.3, 2.7 GPA to 3.3 GPA, where they're not bad students, right? And I think typically we focus on the high achieving students, especially in STEM. I'm director of advising for this College of Science.
Uh-huh.
So I work mostly with I work with STEM students. Um, so that's that 2.7 to 3.3, where that 2.7 they don't really qualify for grad school, and at 3.3 don't really qualify for professional school. But
Mhm.
that's typically their goal, is professional school or graduate school. So that's really the biggest gap, is advising those students there. And what we're doing wrong is we're not doing enough program to help them find either jobs or helping them find ways to be competitive for grad school. Oftentimes, they have that 3-2 where they can get into grad school, but they don't have that research. They don't know how to get a letter of recommendation. They don't know how to network. That 2.7, they haven't done an internship. They haven't done an externship. They haven't worked in a lab. They're just not sure. These students aren't sure what their next steps are.
And so, but when you talk about the school itself, is that something that that the school should have as a part of the curriculum, or part of what the curricula should be is to ensure that these students are ready for said situations when they jump to them? Because I think that that's part of that learning process, or is that not?
I think the school should be ready for that. Um, but I do think I do think these are the students who don't show up sometimes, and they're
Okay.
hard, right? Because there is such a focus on those students who are on probation or warning, and
Mhm.
the students that are high achieving are the ones that show up as well. So these are the students who just get lost in the shuffle.
First generation college students, students of color, students navigating poverty. How does your team approach serving these populations differently, and why does a one size fit all model fail them?
I think so. We have different like mentoring programs for these students, especially for our first gen students. We have we really focus on those students. Us we can't necessarily focus on poverty students just because again that dear colleague letter messes up a lot of different things. Um, but that first gen is something really hone in on, just so we can say like, hey, here's this language that you don't understand. This is what the registrar is. This is what registration means. This is how you work financial aid. Here is what peer assistant learning is. All this language that you may not know when you get to college. Here are all these mentoring programs specifically for first gen students.
So, what does a truly transformative learning environment look like in practice? Not on a strategic plan document, in the lived experience of a student walking through your institution's doors.
I would say a transformative learning experience. Again, it's something that students walk away with knowing that their best interest was in mind, right? And their best interest, everybody has different interest, right? But there needs to be something for them. There needs to be something that allows them to explore their identities, explore who they are, explore what they want to do after they graduate. And I think at the institution I work at is big enough where they can do that.
So, how do you hold institutions accountable for equity commitments that often look good on paper but stall in implementation? What does real accountability look like from where you sit?
Ooh, that's a good question. Whew. I think first of all, I think a lot of institutions, depending on the institution type, they don't want to be held accountable. They want to say that they're doing it. One of the things, um, one of the things phrases I use is brochure diversity,
Okay.
where they send out the brochures and you'll have that diversity where they're just like, yeah, this is equity. You're gonna come here and you're gonna see people of different colors and they're gonna speak different languages. Then you get here and you're just like, this looks nothing like the brochure. So I think there's a lot of colleges and universities, especially some of these bigger universities and more well-known universities, they don't want to be held accountable. They want to say they're doing the work, but the second that Dear Colleague letter dropped, they were like, we're dropping these offices. We're dropping our diversity offices. And that was the end of it.
Wow. Um, if you had full authority to redesign advising and student success infrastructure at your institution from the ground up, what would you build and what would you tear down first?
Whew. I think the first thing I would tear down is the accommodation office. One of the things I found out when I was doing my research was there was this accommodation office that gives provisional accommodations where if a student comes in and says, I need accommodations, this is why, here's some of my documentations, they give them accommodations for a full semester. And there's other offices who say, without that documentation, you're not getting anything. I think giving accommodations is key because that's the difference between a student succeeding and a student not succeeding. Then from there, I would redesign first year programs to be more intersectional. I think oftentimes we focus on one identity. I'll give you the example, right? In undergrad, there was a black male initiative where they put if you were a black male, they put you in there, right? There was different first ones, but if you identified as a black male and you wanted to be in that black male initiative, no matter what your other intersectional identity was, they put you in there, which is great in concept, but it didn't account for those other intersectional identities. They might be struggling because they might be used to a rural campus, or they might be struggling because they have a disability, right? They may not be struggling because of the black identity. So really looking at those intersectional identities. So those are like the major two I would do.
So with that, I mean, would that be with your reasoning for that? Would that be to help with the diversification of the school itself in general, or is that something that's to just help some people with their intersectionalities of navigating the school system itself?
I think it'll help the school in general. I think when you help the most vulnerable, it helps everybody, right? I think because it sets a minimum standard. So if you know that the people with disabilities need accommodations, it's going to help set a standard of care. If you know people need to explore the other intersectional identities, you're going to create programming for people to explore the intersectional identities. And that's just going to trickle down to everybody.
Let's transition over to mental health vulnerability and the Black experience. Let's go to the most personal territory of tonight's conversation. When did mental health become something you could no longer manage in silence? And what was it like to acknowledge that to yourself, let alone to the world?
I would say about 2021, yeah, I think I got diagnosed 5 years ago. So 2021, I was just going through a terrible time. And one of my friends was like, "Hey, this isn't normal." Like, I was in therapy for like 2 years at that point, and she was just like, "Hey, I know you're in therapy, but you may need that extra help. So I'm gonna give you this extra push for you to seek maybe a psychiatrist." Um, so I did. I've always been one open to help. So I got help quietly. Then about a year later, I was just like, I need to be open with my diagnosis. I need to share with the world because there might be someone who's struggling with something, struggling with who they are. And I have the power and people listen to me. So I was open. Then I got a lot of messages saying, like, hey, I'm struggling with something. And that really just opened the conversation up for a lot of different people.
Wow. So with that, I mean, and you just felt, I mean, it was just like a natural thing that, since you have this connection with people and it was something that you was going through, and it sounds like this was also during the COVID time. So with that being said, I mean, like, what was the thing that wanted you to be so open about that? Because I think that's a really wonderful thing, but what was the thing that came to you that said it's time for you to be open about this?
Um, I'm not exactly sure, to be honest, but if I can take a guess, I I would just say I was talking to family members and friends privately, and I was unsure how they would react, but they reacted with all love. They were like, "We still love you. We're here for you." Then I was just like, at this point, I don't care what the world thinks. But I think for me, it was just important. It was important to get it out there because at this point, I think my research started to become focused on bipolar disorder. So people were going to find out at some point, and I wanted to get ahead of it. So I think that might have been what it was.
So describe the professional mask, the one so many of us wear. What did yours look like, and how long did you wear it before it started to cost you more than it was worth?
Whew, I would say I always tell people professionally can't no one see me. I wrote book chapters. I'm nationally known. I'm a national speaker. I'm nationally known in my organization, right? I've director of advising. I served on national boards. I've done all these things professionally, but I think it was to hide the pain, right? And it got to a certain point where I was just like, I'm struggling internally. And I just reached a tipping point where I was just like, I don't want to leave my room. Like I literally can't do it anymore, right? I can't. I couldn't do it anymore. So I think that mask started to crack about a little bit before I got diagnosed, right? My friend noticed, she was just like, hey, you're not behaving like your normal self. You're not, you don't want to go to class. You're not showing up for yourself, let alone others. And I think that's when it started to crack, when I stopped showing up for myself.
Mm. So, can you describe to us what were some of these things that that you were experiencing? That people were showing, and what your friend was telling you that they saw.
It was a lot of like hypomania, well, mania. Like I was being impulsive, staying up late, just a lot of grandiosity, things like that. Just a lot of like a lot of the symptoms of bipolar disorder I was just displaying. We weren't sure what it was, but or if it was anything for that matter. So, but it was something worth checking out.
There's a cultural theology in many Black communities that says God won't put more on you than you can bear, and in that theology, however well intended, has sometimes been weaponized against people who needed clinical help. How do you hold your faith and your mental health journey simultaneously?
Well, that's a good question. I remember I met up with a friend in New Orleans, and they were like, "Hey, what you going through? It's just God testing you, and God won't put anything more on you than you can bear." I swear that was probably verbatim. And I was just like, my life is it's a crap show. So I I I, I think he put a little more on me than I could bear. Just a smidge. So I think I hold him simultaneously, knowing that God created who I am. So it's part of my journey, right? God created medication, right? He created the doctors, he created the psychiatrist, he created the labs, right? He created all these things. He created this so people like me can get help, so we can live healthy lives, so we can glorify him. So that's really how I hold that.
What does healing actually look like in your life today? Not the Instagram version, but the real, unglamorous daily practice of it. What are you still working on?
I think first it starts with my medication. Taking that is the very first thing I do when I wake up. I take my medication. But I think it starts with being honest with who I am and my faults. I think that's part of being of healing, is knowing who I am. Then from there, it's keeping myself out of trouble, right? And that means not associating with people and things that'll bring me back to the old me. It means meeting with my psychologist regularly, meeting with my therapist regularly, talking to my wife regularly, talking to my son regularly, talking to my family regularly, you know, doing all these things, listening to audiobooks, doing my podcast, all these things that bring me pleasure and joy without making me manic.
Oh wow. That's so is that like a step above bipolar disorder?
So there's two bipolar 1 and 2 are a little different. Bipolar 1 usually is has mania and bipolar 2 has hypomania.
Okay. Black men are statistically among the least likely to seek mental health treatment. As someone who has lived that statistic and broken from it, what do you understand now about why that gap is so wide and what needs to change?
Um I think they just don't know, right? Because I thought it was normal behavior. I thought the hypersexuality was just me being in my late 20s, early 30s, right? I thought the grandiosity was just me being confident, right? I thought the impulsivity was just me being, you know, cool, right? Or just being, I thought there was nothing wrong with the impulsiveness, right?
Right.
I thought all these things were just character traits, right? And because I was never an angry person, so that wasn't part of who I was. So I never seen that. So it was hard to diagnose that or see that as a problem when I didn't have necessarily the of positive side effects of bipolar disorder because those things were negative, but I never had that anger or those things that also come along with bipolar disorder. But the lows were so low, the depression was so low, but I thought it was just sadness, right? I was like, everybody gets sad from time to time, but my sadness was so deep. But I was just like, people get sad, but I didn't realize how sad it was. So I think for a lot of people, I think is they don't know, they don't realize they need help. And I also think people people are not necessarily afraid. I don't want to use the word afraid to get help because I don't think they're necessarily afraid to get help, but people people don't want to be judged for getting help, right? They don't
That's
want to be
understandable.
they don't want to be told that they're crazy, right? There's that big stigma. That right? People you tell people you're bipolar, they're like, "Oh, you're crazy." Right? And I don't and like I said, I don't think people are afraid to get help. I think they're afraid I think they don't want to be called crazy.
So it's that stigma is what's causing the problem.
Yeah.
Um, Final question for you. Um, what would you say to the Black professional sitting in the audience tonight? The one who has it all together on the outside and is quietly terrified on the inside, who is not sure they are allowed to admit they are struggling.
I would say first of all, find a safe place within yourself. It doesn't have to be a safe place outside yourself, but find that safe place, listen to that quiet voice within yourself. Find it, sit down with it and say, "Self, let's reflect. Let's discuss this. Let's see what's really going on inside of me." Then say, "You know what? Self, I discussed it with myself. Let me go discuss it with the proper help, the proper person. Is it a therapist? Is it a psychiatrist? Is it a life coach? Is it is it someone else? Let me discuss it with the person I need to discuss it with, right? And then from there, I think you'll be able to better manage that."
So, are there any words of wisdom and encouragement you'd like to leave for our audience? Tell them how to connect with you on social media, your website, how to watch, listen to your podcast, any of those good things.
Yeah, I think for the listener is, I think, like I said, my two things are being kind and confident. So if I can leave you with anything, it's to be kind and confident. Always be kind to yourself, be kind to others. I think there's not enough kindness in this world. We see it every day where people just aren't kind to one another. And no matter who you are, what you are, your nationality, your race, your sexual orientation, just be kind, right? And be confident in yourself. I think people people spend the first 20, 25 years being told not to be confident. Then they have all these confident programs, these confident workshops in your late 20s, like, come be confident, rah, rah, rah. But have that sense of confidence in yourself and be confident in others, right? Trust others. But and I think go back to that cultural competency. Be culturally competent, right? There are people who look differently than you, and but sit down to understand them. What is it? Seek to understand, or whatever the 7 habits of healthy people. Seek to understand first. Um, but you can reach me at Black and Diagnosis under my name there. I'm on Instagram. And the Black and Diagnosis on Spotify and Apple Podcast. Those are the two main places you can listen to. We're unveiling video podcasts on Spotify and YouTube in the next couple of weeks. So you can look out for that in the next couple of weeks. But Spotify, Apple Podcast, give it a listen. They're really good podcast. Rate them. They're really strong. Info at gerronscott.com if you like to collab or want to reach out directly. Info at GERRONSCOTT.com. Black and Diagnosed. And if you have any questions, just please reach out. I'm very friendly. I love talking to people. And thank you, Charles, for having me on the show.
Oh, yes, sir. We definitely there's a lot that we didn't get the chance to get to. We definitely got to have you back. And so I'm just looking forward to following you and especially listening to your podcast because I'm sure that is very, very interesting and it's very informative. I think for anybody that wants that sound mind and peace of mind, your mental health is always where you want to be. You want to be strong on that. Um, so in closing, after I close the show, do you have a couple of minutes to stick around?
Yeah.
Okay. I want to thank each and every individual for watching the show. Those of you who have been here the entire time as we watched the show, I want to thank you for your support as always. Also, for those of you that are watching on all of our channels, especially the YouTube channels, for the new people that have not yet subscribed and enabled all notifications, I would ask if you would please support us by subscribing, hitting all notifications, as well as liking and sharing this video with all of your friends and family. And so in closing, we say a lot of things on this show. We have conversations that challenge, conversations that celebrate, conversations that push us to think different. But about who we are and what we carry. But tonight was different. Tonight felt like a window thrown open in a room that had been closed for too long. Dr. Gerron Scott sat with us and did something that very few public figures in any space are willing to do. He told the truth. Not the curated truth, not the version of truth that has been run through a publicist and a public relations framework, the real truth about what it costs to carry a clinical diagnosis through the halls of a university as a director, as a PhD, as a leader that everyone looks to and no one checks on. When he talked about removing the professional mask, I felt that in my bones. I know some of you felt it too. And then there was an image of his, there's an image, that, the spiritual anchor, of people that come to who we are and those people that love us. And in this case, we're speaking of, the women that were so important in his life. You could feel here in the room tonight, you could feel what it meant to have someone believe in you so completely and so unconditionally that their belief becomes the bedrock you build a legacy on. That was sacred. And Black and Diagnosed, his podcast. Family, if you take one thing from tonight, let it be this. Go listen to that podcast right now, not later, now. Because what Dr. Scott is building, there is a sanctuary for every Black person who has ever sat in the parking lot of a therapist's office and driven away. For every Black man who has swallowed his pain because he thought strength meant silence. For every Black woman who has held everyone else together while quietly coming apart. That platform is a lifeline, and it exists because one man decided that his diagnosis was not a secret to be hidden. It was a story to be shared. To our American Black and white family, share this episode not just because it is good content, but because there is someone in your life who needs to hear it. Someone is struggling in silence. Someone is performing strength and running out of performance. Send it to them. Tell them they are not alone. Again, follow Black and Diagnosed. Follow Dr. Scott wherever he creates and wherever he leads. And stay with us here at AMIBW, because this is what we do. We bring the voices that the world needs to hear, and we make sure they are heard. I'm your host, Charles Zachary King, and this has been American Black and White. And tonight, as always, we chose truth. We chose light. We chose each other. And until next time, be well, be whole, and never let the world convince you that your story does not deserve to be told out loud. Good night, and we will see you guys tomorrow night for another great show. I want to thank you all for being here again.